Now, a great guest this morning, my buddy Becky Gray from Carolina Journal, carolinajournal.com, and the John Locke Foundation. And one of the most in-the-know people in the capital city. Becky is, when I need to know what's really going on, I go to Becky. Good morning, Becky. How are you?
Good morning. Doing great. A little busy with the Senate budget being released late last night.
Yeah. And, of course, one of your jobs is to kind of analyze that stuff and see what's in it. So you guys do a great job at Carolina Journal of kind of cutting through the BS and letting people know the truth. And here's the big question. Of course, we talked about this morning. The governor's budget included raises for school teachers pretty much across the board. And earlier this year, he announced his first-year teacher plan, which would make sure that no teacher got paid less than $35,000. His plan was going to cost about $200 million in this budget. Clearly, with the Republicans in charge and an election year on top of that, there's not going to be a tax increase, Becky. So yesterday, Phil Berger and the Senate leadership released their budget, more than double the increase for school teachers from $200 million in the governor's budget. The Senate budget proposal has $468 million going to school teachers. I guess the first thing that comes to mind is, well, all of this screaming about school teacher budgets in North Carolina not having a commitment to public education and that kind of thing. They're trying to answer that and answer it in a big way. But the second thing that comes to mind is if they're not going to raise taxes, what is getting cut, right? And that's what everybody's running up and down the walls in Raleigh trying to figure out right now is what is getting cut, because Senator Berger did not talk about where the money was coming from in the press conference yesterday. Have you been able to figure it out yet?
Well, not entirely, to be honest with you, but starting to get a feel for it as we go through this. And again, Henry, the budget was released late last night. So, and it's a very involved, heavy document. Anybody that's read through the North Carolina budget, it's several hundred pages. But here's what we know so far. Here's where we're going with this. And you're right. This is not only substantial pay increases. This would be the largest pay increases for teachers in North Carolina history.
Wow.
This is what the Senate has proposed. And again, where are they going to get the money? Well, what they've done, what it appears like they've done, is they have gone in and they are prioritizing spending of the taxpayer money. So what we're seeing are lower priority spending in order to fund these substantial teacher pay increases. So since they have taken over in 2011, and then, of course, when Governor McCrory came on board in 2013, you saw a lot of the wasteful spending, of the fraud, of some of the things that Republicans had complained about for years. What you're seeing now is a more fine-tooth evaluation of things. And, Henry, just like you and I have to do and our listeners have to do in our household budgets, if you're a business owner, you have to prioritize where you're going to spend money. And this is what state government has to do as well. And so as we're going through this, what we're seeing is a further coming of low priority spending items.
Becky, your cell phone is beginning to cut out a little bit. I don't know if you can turn your head.
Okay, let me
say that
let me see what I can do.
You said what we're beginning to see is what?
What we're beginning to see is a reprioritization of state spending. And education is a good example, Henry. As we talk about that, education is a very good example. What we've seen in past years is additional programs, is a growth in the Department of Public Instruction, with, quite frankly, not a lot of attention paid in the classroom with those who are actually doing the educating of our kids, the teachers. So what we're seeing, even within DPI in this budget, is going in and cutting some low priority spending. How could that money be better spent if we're going to improve education in North Carolina, and that is paying our teachers well and getting the best and the brightest into teaching in North Carolina and keeping the best teachers in North Carolina? We're going to have to shift some things around. And so that's really what this is about. It's going in and identifying low priority spending. There are significant cuts to the administration, to the bureaucracy of the Department of Public Instruction. And again, and I agree with this, the money needs to be in the classroom. It needs to be where kids are directly affected. And so that we're seeing it certainly in DPI. Another area where we're seeing some significant cuts is within the Department of Public Safety, within the Attorney General's office. taking some of that money, again, low priorities, and putting it in to teacher pay. So I think what the message that I'm seeing so far in this budget is some of these programs may have value, but do they have as much value as ensuring that we have the best education system in North Carolina? So those are kind of some of the decisions that I'm seeing as I'm beginning to go through this budget.
Let me throw out a few things that are beginning to be said. I got some phone calls last night and emails and things like that that may be on the chopping block if the state were to move forward with this sizable of an increase for school teacher raises. News Observer headline today says teaching assistants. Teaching assistant. You said we need to spend the money in the classroom, but I haven't seen the budget, but I'm hearing that the teaching assistant program has been getting cut a little bit here, a little bit there, and there's going to be some concern about that. I think there's a quote in the newspaper here locally this morning from spokesperson for Pitt County Schools concerned about that. The other things that we're seeing, you mentioned the Department of Justice budget. I think with Roy Cooper sticking his neck out and pretty much looking like a gubernatorial candidate in 2016, his budget was a sitting duck, and I think they'll probably be going there. But the other things that we're concerned about down here, particularly, the governor was on with us yesterday, Becky, talking about how he understood the need, and we've been preaching this to the legislators and the state leaders, how important it is to keep the medical community strong in eastern North Carolina. It is not only our economy, but we have a lot of folks down here that need medical care that are very poor, and so the only way they're going to get assistance is through Medicaid, or they're going to it's going to be indigent care that they don't pay for. And, we've got to keep our hospital strong because it's also part of the economy. We're hearing that this Senate budget also hits HHS programs, Health and Human Services programs, pretty hard. Now, I've given you a lot, but let me throw one more in there. We're also hearing that the Senate budget may be pushing down more expenses to the county and the city level. So now I've thrown out a bunch of things there. I'll let you kind of comment on any of that.
Okay, let me try to take those one by one. The teacher assistants, and this is correct. What I've figured out from the budget, I believe, is that they are eliminating teaching assistants in second and third grade. They are leaving them in place for kindergarten and first grade. What we know from empirical evidence, from research, and we've done some of this at the John Locke Foundation, that points to the fact that having teachers' assistants in the classroom do not translate to better outcomes for the students. Now, I know that sounds somewhat counterintuitive, but the fact of the matter is academic studies and research tell us that there are lots of things that impact how well students are doing in the classroom. Having an extra person, having a teacher assistant in that classroom does not necessarily lead to better outcomes for our students. So when you're evaluating this, again, when you are prioritizing your spending, one of the things that you have to look at is where are we getting the best value for every dollar that is spent. And again, what evidence tells us is that having teacher assistants in the classroom does not translate into better outcomes for our students. So that now, of course, there
are people that argue that.
Of course, yeah.
The North Carolina Association of Educators would not agree with you on that.
Right, and it seems counterintuitive, but if you look at the research that has been done, that is what it leads to. So again, if you're going to offer these, if you're going to put the priority of teacher pay increases, you've got to look at other measures, compare values of money that you're spending. You mentioned the Roy Cooper, the Attorney General's office, and the transfer of programs. But and I know that there will be accusations that this is political backlash, that they are getting back at Roy Cooper. And I understand that argument. But the fact of the matter is, if you look at the problems that have been in the SDI over a number of years, if you look at the problems that have been in the crime lab and the blood testing, there have been many cases where people have gone to prison who may very well be innocent because of flawed evidence that came out of the SBI and the crime lab. So what they're doing is they are moving that over to a cabinet department, which, again, if you think about prioritizing spending, making government more efficient, more effective, it makes sense to move those law enforcement functions under a cabinet department.
Mm-hmm.
Whether, what your feelings are about Roy Cooper or who the Attorney General is or who's running for what, if you're looking at efficient measures in state government, this makes sense to move it all into the under one cabinet department. You mentioned Medicaid, the Medicaid community, health care, and of course that is a huge concern here in North Carolina, across the country, of course. And Henry, I know in many rural areas, not just in the east, but in the western part of the state as well, in the smaller communities, there's very legitimate concern about access and particularly for poor people. And again, first blush at this budget, what it looks to me like is they have gone in and taken a look at some of the eligibility requirements of those who would be receiving Medicaid services, looked at the eligibility and also looked at the benefits that are provided and brought that more in line with what our peer states are doing. Over the years, North Carolina has offered more optional services under Medicaid, and they have covered a larger population than other states have. The federal government pays 2/3 of Medicaid expenses, and they mandate that certain populations have to be covered and certain services have to be covered, but they offer states options of, if you want to, you can cover these additional people or these additional services. North Carolina traditionally has done both of those. They have offered more services to more people in the Medicaid community than surrounding states have. And so this is something that we've talked about for a long time, to look at, to prioritize your spending. Let's make sure that we have the money to provide those services to the people who really need it. And then those who may be able to provide for themselves, let them do that.
Let me stop you there, and before you move on, let me ask you about, is there a new strategy underway from the left to talk about people dying from these Medicaid cuts? I've noticed in the last few days, of course, that is now I was wondering what the message was going to be with the NAACP and the Moral Monday movement, and that was a big part of the deal on Tuesday, people carrying signs and complaining about the fact that North Carolina did not expand Medicaid, which, by the way, is breaking the state. But this morning we got a letter to the editor. I don't know how I feel about that. Well, I do know how I feel. We got a professor at ECU who was one of the people arrested last year. This guy, Dr. Gross at ECU, actually encouraging people to join the Moral Monday movement, which I got a problem with. But the truth of the matter is, he's now saying that people are dying. He says that the Medicaid cuts are that people are dying in North Carolina. There was something in the News Observer this morning about somebody else made a comment that people are dying. Is William Barber now putting out a memo saying, here's what we need to say that people are dying from these Medicaid cuts? Have you heard any of that, or is it just my sensitivity to it?
I have not heard that. I have heard claims on the left of all kinds of unfounded accusations and claims that they're making. So I don't put a lot of stock in that. I believe that you need to look at facts and figures. And, did someone who doesn't have health care have a health condition that led to their death? Probably. I mean, that's very likely. Would expanding Medicaid to thousands of additional North Carolinians solve every medical problem for every individual in North Carolina? I doubt that very seriously. You're exactly right on the Medicaid and the challenge that we face here. Medicaid is extremely expensive. It delivers very poor health care is kind of the thing. The health outcomes for people who receive their health insurance through Medicaid is not very good. So it is a crummy program that government is forcing on people. The better alternative to this would be to get a waiver from the federal government for the money that they send down here and allow North Carolina to offer subsidies for people who cannot afford to purchase their health insurance, to purchase a plan that suits their needs, to give them control over their health care and their health insurance. That really is the better alternative, to do a consumer-driven health care rather than to continue to mandate these decisions on individuals.
By the way, here's I just found the line in this letter to the editor from this ECU professor this morning. According to 2 studies, 1,000 to 2,000 needy citizens without unemployment compensation or Medicaid literally will die.
Well,
the unemployment compensation is going to keep them alive. Again, it's the government's responsibility.
That's what it goes to. That's what it goes to. Whose responsibility is it, and who should be responsible? And it's not just who should be responsible, but shouldn't we all have a choice in what kind of health care we have? And should these programs be mandated for many of us to pay for it, and number 2, for the recipients of these programs to have to take whatever it is that the government gives them. And what we have found is Medicaid is a crummy health insurance program.
Becky, I don't want to run out of time. I do want you to speak to the other point that I brought up, because there are a lot of people at the local government level very concerned about the fact that what's happening now, particularly in the Senate budget, is going to push down more costs to cities and counties, things that the state is paying for now, but they're going to say, we're not going to pay for that anymore. You got to pay for that. We've already seen, even in the governor's budget, the workers' comp stuff was pushed down to the county level. I was actually with the governor yesterday, and our mayor here in Greenville, Alan Thomas, cornered him over there at ECU yesterday, and they were talking about that. The mayor was talking to the governor about, we need your help. The state's got to stop pushing these costs down to the cities and to the municipalities. Is that are you seeing any significant signs of that in the Senate budget?
Henry, again, the budget just came out last night, so I have not seen that specifically. What I understand is that that they copied or endorsed some of the recommendations in the governor's office along the workers' comp and I think some kind of disability payment. I don't know the specifics on that, but the cities and the counties have a legitimate concern about that, just like the state has legitimate concerns about mandates that come down from the federal government. This happens at all levels. I know that it's something that the General Assembly is sensitive to. When cities run out of money, they have very few revenue increase. They have very few taxing options. Property rights is the big thing at the county level. And one thing in North Carolina that has made us attractive to businesses and for people to move here is that we have low property taxes compared to other states. So I think it's something that everybody has an interest in keeping. The other thing about that is, though, city governments, county governments, just like the state government, and the state is certainly leading the way and setting the example with this, is cities and counties need to look at their budgets too. They need to prioritize spending. And if they can make an operation where it's more effective, where it's more efficient, where they can spend their money better, then that benefits all of us as taxpayers. And maybe some of the, again, I think the state is kind of leading the way along those lines. But yes, it is a very legitimate concern for local government, and in interest of keeping our property rates, property tax rates low.
There's actually a story on the News Observer website that's been put on since early this morning, right now, about this has just been put up in the last a little bit. Actually, it says it was updated last night, but I guess I missed it. But yesterday, the House and the Senate agreed on this local business tax issue. This is something that was in our local paper and been discussed here in Greenville as well. What we found out is these business privilege taxes that cities were charging, particularly in Raleigh. I know my business partner in Raleigh has been one of the strong opponents of this, because we were told that the way they dole out the business taxes in some of the bigger cities, particularly Raleigh, has been to tax like newspapers at a real low level and radio stations at a really high level. There's been no rhyme or reason as to how that's been done, and so the legislature apparently yesterday has capped what cities can charge for business privilege licenses. And the mayor of Raleigh is bouncing off the walls about that right now, saying, you know what, it's going to cost us all this money. The News Observer story says $62 million will be pushed down. It's going to eliminate $62 million ability of cities to capture that kind of money. But again, the way they've been taxing businesses has been all over the board, Becky. I mean, cities they can look in the mirror and blame themselves for this one.
Right, and that the imposition of those privilege taxes is very arbitrary within cities, and then of course city to city that we see across the state. And as you said, there doesn't seem to be a lot of consistency with it. Businesses, Henry, as you well know, like consistency. Just tell us what we're going to be expected to do, and we'll make the long-term plans to comply with it. Actually, and that is in the tax omnibus bill. That was not part of this budget, although it may be rolled into the budget later today, but that's sort of just legislative process stuff.
Yeah.
But what they actually ended up doing, the latest version of that is they would allow the privilege tax to go on as it has been for a year. And then the privilege tax would be repealed July 15th of 2015. And actually what that does is it allows the General Assembly and the cities to spend the next year figuring out, okay, what is the best way that we can do this? How can we get consistency? Should there be a range of privilege tax?
Yeah. Becky, we're out of time. We got to go. I'm sorry, I'm up against a hard break. But you know, when you're on, you're such a wealth of information that I could just talk to you for another hour. But unfortunately, we got to stop. Hey, thanks for everything, and thanks for that analysis. And I guess we'll find out more in the next few days about what's in this Senate budget and whether it's got a chance to fly in the House.